In this lesson, we'll use instancing to create a nozzle at the back of the engine. Now, the first thing you might notice between this lesson and the last is the fact that the color of the engine has changed. Wasn't really feeling the pink and green of the engine, so all I've done is change some of the colors, some of the object colors for our different pieces, and that's easy to do. Just click on the swatch and change the color. In the next kind of section of this course, we'll go through texturing and adding materials. The color's not really important right now. Just wanted to have a little bit of color to see some of the different pieces a little bit more clearly. So feel free to do that if you like. You can leave the colors the way they were, customize them however you want. It doesn't really matter. So at this point, we want to add some slats at the back here to serve as kind of our nozzle on the back. So to start, let's go to Create, and let's create just a simple box. We'll go to our keyboard entry, and I'm just going to create a 1 by 1 by 1 box. So create that. Let's bring it out here, and then we'll go to Modify to change some of the parameters. So let's dial the length up a bit. So maybe something like that. Let's take our height down to something in that area. We'll move it up into position just up here on the top, and we can kind of penetrate this in a little bit if we want to. All right. And let's also rotate it a bit. So I'm going to rotate it in the X, and let's snap that to a 10-degree rotation. And then we'll just move that down. So we've got something like that. All right, I also want to kind of chamfer the edges. I want to knock off the edges of this piece. So I'm going to convert this to an editable poly. Let's select the edges, and let's go down to Edit Edges under the Rollout, go to Chamfer, and let's change this value to something like 0.03 or so, just to knock off those edges. All right. Now we'd like to taper it. We want it to be wider at the base here and then narrower down here. So let's add a taper modifier. All right. And we want it to affect the block along the y-axis. So we can change the amount here, and you can see how that affects everything. But let's not change it quite yet. Now we want to create our copies. And so to do that, we're going to use our working pivot, and that drops it back at the origin. Okay, so we're now rotating basically around this axis right here. Let's go to Rotate, and we'll hold down Shift while we rotate in the Y, and let's rotate 30 degrees. Okay, now instead of creating a copy, we're going to create an instance, so they're all going to be sort of connected. And we want to create 11 copies, so we go all the way around, and that gives us this. Now we'll go back into any of these and go to our taper, and we can change the amount now of our taper. So let's dial that up until we get something that's wide at the top and narrow at the bottom. Okay, in my case, it's about 0.96 in the amount. You can play around with the limiting the effect as well. You can limit it on one side or the other depending on the length. Mine were about, I think, 9 units long, and about 0.27, I believe, was the size. Okay, but you can see how we can really quickly build those up, and the taper allows us to get the spacing just right. So we've got a good number. We're able to drop those in, and then we can use the taper to match up the top and the bottom as far as the spacing goes for those. Let's also add a cone inside there. All right, so let's take a look at our object types. We've got standard primitives here, and there is actually a primitive that is a cone. So we'll go ahead and grab the cone, and let's just add some values in here and create that cone, and then we'll bring it in and modify it. Okay, let's grab it, bring it in here. Let me grab that other guy. Looks like we got a duplicate. There we go. So I'm going to make sure I turn our working pivot off. So here's our cone, which doesn't look like a cone, much like a cone right now. That's because we've just dropped in numbers for the two different radius amounts. So if we take the radius, you can see here down, you can see that starts to give us our cone, or we take this radius down, it can get our cone that way. Let's go ahead and rotate this, and I'm just going to rotate it 90 degrees. Let's change the height, okay, and we can drop the base kind of in here where we want it, and if we go to our of our side or top views, we can look and just drop this in back at the back. Okay, and then change our height, so we can make that height a bit longer. Okay, we can change our radius at the base, so it's a bit bigger. Okay, and we just want it to extend out from the back of the engine, and we can modify some of those parameters. I want to give it a little bit bigger base there. Maybe make it not quite come out so far. If you don't want it to come to an exact point, you can increase that radius if you want something like that. Okay, you also have the ability to create cap segments here. So looking at this, you can see that we now have cap segments. We take that off, we just have that one polygon there. And then we can also change the number of sides if we want to take this down. Maybe we don't need that many. Okay, so a lot of parameters here that you can play with on the cone. Okay, and so with those slats added and that cone, I think the next thing that we want to add is kind of a power couple object here on the side. We can create that using a number of splines, combining those splines together in some interesting ways. We can create that, and let's also add a little bit more detail here to the back part of the engine. So let's go ahead and do that in the next lesson.